little higher, only because, you know, it was worth more. But we just went, you know, strictly for the list price.
Yeah.
And I was trying not to do a
lot. To the listing agent before you made your offer? Did you talk to the listing agent before you made your offer?
Yeah, we talked. I knew she had multiple offers. That's why we came in at a full price offer, because I knew if we went lower, I knew it wasn't going to be accepted. But I was expecting at least a counter. I was not expecting just a full decline, you know, because it was a pretty clean offer.
Okay.
I mean, we didn't ask for a lot. The only thing was the closing cost. But of course, if someone else came in and said zero closing cost, then of course, you know, we would lose out. But
are your buyers okay? Are they gonna?
Yeah, they're fine.
Going with you and.
Yeah. We're gonna look at another property tomorrow. So we have about 3 backup properties. We just, you know, we wanted to make an offer on that property. We gave them, like he said, at least 24 hours to give us a reply so that we can go ahead and make an offer on another property. So hopefully the offer that we make on this property, hopefully it at least get countered, if nothing else. Like, even if we have to go a little bit above asking price. So, yeah.
Try to do the listing price plus add whatever the closing costs on top of the listing price.
Hello, everyone.
So net their listing price.
Anyone hear me?
I can hear you.
Everybody wave.
Welcome back.
All right. So who pulled the plug? I just want to know. So we're in Brookhaven. Oh my goodness, our alarm just went off. Like, I think it's so bad, Thunder. It's like crazy. So, all right, Kristen, are you there?
I'm here.
I didn't know if you were in the part of the office that was underwater.
This part underwater?
No, I'm just kidding.
No, but I do hear the alarm. It goes off every time we lose power.
Okay. So let's get back up. I think we're about to delve into, I think we're on that last script. Let's look at that last script page.
That's the right one, Doug, the one I just pulled up?
How long the property has been active. We kind of talked about this, right? And we talk about leaving enough time for people to respond. We know that people don't want to jump price points, right? So if you got a seller is not going to jump from 300 to 250 without marketing it at 275. Makes sense to everyone? I mean, why would you? And let's go to the next script. Practice. I wrote good under that one. Don't be afraid to put in practice by hear the truth. So talk about that. That's a good script to practice. All right, let's get into the offer. We got about an hour and we got a lot of stuff to go through. So we kind of covered some of this, but I wanted to make sure you see this. All right. So purchase and sale agreement, you date it. That's the offer date. For this example, we just put some things in here for an example. That's not an actual MLS number. Okay. 1234 Main Street. And then legal description. I told you, I think it should always be provided best practice from your alliance partner, 1 to 2 hours, 1 to 2 hours. Yep. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's look at, all right, you can fill in the rest, but I always like it as an exhibit. So let's go to the next point, 2, purchase price of the property. We put 300 for the example. I think price should always be dictated by how long you're on the market. The longer you're on the market, the lower you can offer. The less you've been on the market or far from situation, the seller is looking for their number.
Are you using a mouse?
I'm sorry?
It's your job to clean up today. Come here. Joshua, come here.
Claudette, you're not on mute.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Are you using a mouse? Because trying to take notes, look at your handwriting, I feel like my eyes are going berserk.
Am I using the mouse? I got Miss Christian's doing it. I'm sorry.
Okay, perfect.
Does that look okay? And remember, this is being videotaped and she will send you this. Okay, Ms. Dobbs? So she will send this to you. So
Okay.
if you want to just kind of listen, take some notes, you will get this whole Dougie scratch, chicken scratch stuff, okay, if it helps. All right, so purchase price we talked about, closing costs. I usually use leave blank in competitive offer situations because some sellers, if they get 5 offers and 2 of them are asking for closing costs, they throw them away. So sometimes I leave it blank, but I try to go back and get them after we get an agreement, because if you're not selected, it doesn't matter what you have in that space. Correct? Everybody agree? If you're not selected as the offer, doesn't matter what you have in closing costs, because a lot of sellers in their mind think they shouldn't pay closing costs. But get it under contract. If your client really needs some money, see if you can raise the listing price up to go down. Sometimes you don't have to do that, but I find in competitive situations, in most cases, it's better to negotiate without closing costs. Because sometimes they'll just discard your offer based on what's in that space, whatever it is. Number 4, closing date and possession. Generally, you don't want to go more than 30 to 45 days without talking to the lender, because the lender sometimes says the rate I am quoting, you can only lock for a certain period of time. So if your buyer's being told they can get a 3% rate, they can lock in that rate once they have a contract. If you have a 90-day closing or 60-day closing, the bank may say, whoa, we can't promise a rate of 3% that long. Does that make sense to everybody? Without your buyer paying what's called a discount or some money to secure that rate and to hold on to it. So I always look at the closing date of, if it's within 30 to 45 days, most lenders are okay. And now I think 60 days. But if you're going a little bit longer closing, make sure the rate can be secured, because if rates go up, your buyer is going to go, whoa, that's not cool. Okay? And talk to your individual mortgage person about that. I always like to do at closing transfer property. Okay? If it's my buyer, if I can get the seller out at closing, that's awesome. All right? If it's my seller wants to hang around for a day or two, make sure the buyer closes. I try to do that. But temporary occupancy agreement needs to be attached if you don't close at closing. Okay? Makes sense. Let's see. Holder of earnest money. I think it always should be your buyer or seller. Should always be your office. In our case, we're a Keller Williams Peachtree Road office. I know Kathy's going to interpret the contract, and I understand the contract. So I know that I'm going to advise my client to the contract and license law, and it will be interpreted that way. Other brokers do not. There are several brokerages, and I won't be negative to any brokerage, that protect their agents. There are several brokerages that have brokers, just like me, that are in place. Those brokers, how they passed a broker's test, I don't know. Okay? So if you want to protect your client, because it is an interpretation, usually outside of due diligence, it's an interpretation that's not cut and dry. You want your office to hold it. Okay? And the reason everybody goes, well, how can you get the seller? How can you get, if you're representing the seller? I usually say, look, we have multiple offers coming in. My seller feels most comfortable with offers if we hold the earnest money. Then almost always is changed to us. Okay? And if I'm a buyer, I always say, look, best practice is buyers, agents hold the earnest money. But the earnest money is really for the seller taking it off the market for the period of time, right? That's what really earnest money is for, the consideration of taking it off the market. So it really should be held by the seller, because the seller's agent, the seller's brokerage, because that's who it's for. Reason it's been held by buyer's agents all this time is because it's convenient, because the buyer's agents with the buyer write me a check and I'll go take it to my brokerage. And that's why it started shifting from from sellers holding it to buyers holding it. Because everybody go, well, buyers always hold it. Well, no, it's a negotiation. All right. Closing attorney, we use our alliance partner here, McManamy, McLeod, and Heller. Everybody has one. You can have 3 attorneys. Our Supreme Lending works with MMH, and a buyer, the mortgage bank is represented by the attorney. The attorney represents the mortgage bank, not the buyer and seller. I think they should be people who work together. It's a smoother closing, okay? Earnest money, 1%, $3,000 is what we put here. I never try to do less than 1%. It's just not taken seriously. And I always give about 4 days from binding agreement day, okay? Let's go down to the end of this page and we'll see if there's any questions before we go through it. Due diligence, 7 to 14 days is typical. I put 10 in here. I blame this on inspections. Right now, our last 10 inspections, our average inspection time of, like, I called the next, like an hour later or 2 hours later, somebody on our team calls and orders the inspection. We're hearing 7 days out. So if you do a 7-day due diligence, you're not going to have time, right? So I blame, and I tell sellers this and listing agents saying, look, I don't know if you're experiencing this, but we give 3 licensed ASHI inspectors to our buyers, and I just checked, and all of them are more than 7 days out. I'm going to put 10 or 14 days. Would you be comfortable with that? And I'll explain that in the letter to the seller. But I just want to make sure you understand why we're doing the due diligence longer. You see, this is not Doug saying due diligence should be 14 days. This is the inspection industry saying it should be 14 days. Now, if I was to talk about negotiating tomorrow, I just set up negotiations based on how I just framed this offer. Do you guys understand that? And that's why I think this class needs to be taught by the same agent. Because in this case, what I'm doing is framing things in a way that's going to be received that it's not my idea. Because what happens with agents, like big time agents, I will tell you, because I co-op with a lot of them, they're all great people, but they can be pushy, bullyish, arrogant, and they want to argue with you. Does everybody understand where that could take place? Raise your hand. So to avoid that, say the industry is not allowing me to do a shorter period of time because there's so many inspections going on. Now, they can't push back against that. All right? And they say, well, you know, my people over at it takes 3 days and I know who they are. I said, okay, well, I'll change the contract. Then all of a sudden your offer might get accepted just because of that. So be on your toes and listen. And I would put, you know, remember 7 to 14 days is typical. Now I would say we really need 14 days because of the inspection time. All right. Now, option money. I kind of went over at the break. Does anybody want me to go over option money again that was not in that conversation? Turn on your mic and say, Doug, please review that.
Doug, please review that.
Please review.
All right, here we go. So option money, if you're in a multiple offer situation, is another way to make your offer look really good. And basically what you're doing in a normal situation, we're just going to use rounded math, okay? Let's say you were putting $10,000 in due diligence. So you know that the seller knows that in let's say 10 days right there, you see on the screen, that if you had $10,000 in earnest money, you could get that money back for any reason in those 10 days, okay? What option money does is you're saying that there's a part of the money that I'm going to let you, and I should have, you know, I left it blank, but let's say I put in $5,000 there. It's basically telling the seller that if I don't close for any reason I don't close, doesn't matter if I change my mind a day later during due diligence, you get to keep that money. So in lieu of $10,000, or we'll use the example here, $3,000 earnest money, maybe I put $2,000 in option money and $1,000 in earnest money. And that earnest money can come back to me during due diligence or some of the other contingencies possibly. But the $2,000 seller gets to keep. Now, if I close, the seller has to apply the option money toward the purchase price, right? So if I close that $2,000 option money on a $300,000 house, now I only, between my down payment and the bank loan, we only owe $298,000 because the seller's already getting it. And the option money is a check written to the seller. Check with your lender and make sure that's okay. They might have a certain way they want you to do it. Get a copy of that after it's went through the bank so they can apply it toward your purchase. So if you know that the house is going to be pretty good and you want to make sure you get it and you don't think you're going to terminate, then taking some of your earnest money and going ahead and giving it to the seller that's non-refundable, but applied if you purchase it, is probably a good idea. Does that make sense? How did I do? Everybody good? Okay. All right. So lead-based paint, we know what that is. Some compliance departments make you fill that out even if the home was built prior to 1978. Built after 1978. So some brokerages make you do it. So because they don't want to take a guess or it might be mislabeled or whatever. So I always fill that out. Let's see. Number 10, brokerage. Okay, this is important, brokerage relationships. Do you guys understand that you check the top box if you're representing the buyer as a client? You check the next box if you're working with the buyer as a customer. The difference is a customer, you're only allowed, I'm paraphrasing this because there's a whole 2-page GAR form that explains working with a customer if you want to read it. But basically, they're not a client. So as a customer, you're only allowed to do administrative, scribe type activities. You do not advise them. You don't give them information. You don't share confidentiality. Makes sense? The third one is acting as a dual agent representing buyer seller. Now, I know our office, and I think for Ms. Rawls, I think all 6 offices, nobody does dual agency, correct? Who does dual agency in your group? I'll give you 5 seconds. Nobody? Right, so I think all offices are represented, so there's no dual agency here. So you would never check that. And then acting as a designated agent. Now that would be like if Ms. Dobbs and Ms. Brady were in the same office, and one was representing the buyer and one was representing the seller, they would be designated agents. Does that make sense? Because you work for the same office. Now we're in the same Rawls group, so if Ms. Dobbs is in an office and I'm in a different office, we would not be designated agents, even though we both work for Rawls Group, because each office is considered an independent operation. Make sense? All right, number C. In this case, I gave an example. The seller is a licensed agent in the state of Georgia and related to the buyer/seller. Okay, so if there's a relationship there, you have to disclose it. Now, if that relationship is not yours, and you know of it, you can fill it out. So if the listing agent, and I'm the buyer's agent, and I know the listing agent's representing her brother, I would figure it out, fill it out. If the listing agent was also the owner of that property, you would put that there. The agent, the principal, the seller of the property is also an agent licensed in the state of Georgia. Make sense? And then I put time limit. We kind of talked about time limit, how you want to do time limit, and you put it there. Okay? All right, next page. All right, before we do the next page, and I want to go through this real quick. Is there any questions on the front page? So, I will tell you guys and ladies, the purchase and sale agreement, you should read, if you take some time in your planning and laying out your week, you can tell I did. I read GAR forms, STIPs. I spend an hour a week, and I'm a broker and I see it, and I've read this probably 1,000 times. It changes every year. I will take an hour and just read forms and read, because these forms are the nature of our business and you should understand them. And reason most agents are in a compliance or qualifying broker's office with, oh, I didn't know this, da, 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 da. 95% of your problems could be satisfied if you just read your form. This is an 8-page form. You should know it like the back of your hand. Okay, I can almost recite this, but we don't have the time. But I tell you, the more you know about it, the better you will be as an agent, because this is your tool, your craft. So everything on that first page is, if you look at it, is explained on the next few pages. So we're just going to hit some highlights. I'm not going to go through all this. So if you look at, this comes up. If you look on B section, go down to 3C, prorations highlighted. This is very important because people ask about the tax bill. Buyer and seller shall, upon the issuance of the actual tax bill or the appeal being resolved, promptly make such financial adjustments between themselves as are necessary to correct or prorate the tax bill. In the event there are tax savings resulting from a tax appeal, third-party professional costs to handle the appeal may be deducted from the savings of the tax year before reprorating. Any pending tax appeal for the year in which the property is sold shall be deemed assigned to the buyer at closing. So a lot of times people go, they didn't escrow enough, or they didn't do this, or they didn't do that. But when the actual tax bill comes in, everybody is supposed to cooperate and make the accurate adjustments. And the attorney usually gets involved in that did the closing. Closing date and possession. Buyer seller may unilaterally extend the closing date for 8 days upon notice to the other party given prior to or on the date of closing, and there's all these stipulations. So you can unilaterally extend for those reasons below. So make sure that you read those. That's probably a time you call in your coach or your compliance or your qualifying broker to help you understand whether or not you have the right to extend a contract. All right, next section. Let's go down. I think is there anything else on that page? Holder of earnest money. This talks about earnest money. You should read this. You should know how earnest money works. If it's in your hand, it's deemed to be collected. You cannot give it back. Well, the contract terminates 1 day later and it's in your file, you've received it. So you need to go to your compliance broker and say, what do I need to do? Because there's a process of giving earnest money back. All right, so don't make that mistake. You can get yourself in a lot of trouble. Number 6 just basically says a buyer has a right to select closing attorney. It's somebody reputable I know, and it will help me get a deal or not get a deal. I will be open to allowing the other agent to choose. Okay? All right, and we just talk about the lender, and the lender basically hires the attorney to represent them. The buyer chooses because they choose their lender. All right? All right, keep going down. Earnest money, talks a little bit more about that. Who's entitled to it? Disbursement of, interpleader, what that means, and hold harmless. You should read that paragraph the next time you take an hour to read your documents. Understand earnest money. It's very important, okay? If an earnest money check bounces, what happens next? How much time does the seller have to decide? It's 7 days, but the seller can decide whether or not, if it's not remedied, whether or not to move forward. Because the earnest money is never collected does not mean the contract's terminated. You can finish a contract with earnest money. Earnest money, if you remember from your license law, is not consideration for a contract. You do not have to have earnest money. People can have contracts with no earnest money. I've seen dads sell to their sons and say, I don't need any earnest money. So our friends sell to friends, I don't need any earnest money. So it's not required. But if you say you're going to have it and it's not collected, or if there's a problem with it, bounces from the bank, or you get a return check, there are things that have to happen. So you should probably I would always learn that and rely on your compliance or qualifying broker to tell you how to make sure you're compliant when you do this. All right, inspection and due diligence, right to inspect the property. Now, this is pretty confusing. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. But when you do investment property, sometimes they'll say the property as is. So you can inspect the property without due diligence. All right? So you have the right to inspect it at buyer's expense in reasonable times. And you're basically saying, I'm probably not going to ask for anything because the seller doesn't have to do anything, but you do have a right to enter the property and inspect it. You usually do this when there's no due diligence. Duty to inspect a neighborhood. You go beyond that. You should never, ever, ever get involved in making statements about this is a good school system, or and I got to be careful because I know a lot of great agents will do that, and they'll make qualifications where this school gets rated 8.0 or whatever. You should never assume that your rating system or rating system that's been published makes or defines if a school is the right fit for your client. So what I do is give them websites to evaluate. Great Schools is one to evaluate. Also, another one is a Georgia Governor's, I should have this. I think it's on my computer. Because I have all these saved and I just have it on my desktop. Georgia Governor's, I think school reports or something like that. I like that a lot because it gives demographics, it gives ratings for the last 5 years, and people want to see that. So I let them investigate that. And then when we go talk about where we're going to go look for homes, they give me the school systems. I don't make school system recommendations. That can get you into big trouble, okay? School can be an A 1 year and then an F the next, all right? So let them make the decision, and you be the orchestra conductor and conduct the process and give them the information where they can do the very best job in their due diligence. So as is, this is very important. As is not as is. Still, a seller must disclose defects. They are not allowed not to do it, okay? And when you see a lot of investors or people not use agents and they say a property as is, you need to be careful. because they know if they hire an agent would have to disclose defects. If you list a property and your client says as is, and you know there's a defect, or you know they got an inspection report and they say, well, that was just a bunch of baloney. But if it's a licensed ASHI inspector and he pointed out defects, then the seller's obligation is to refute that with a like type of expertise. Just because he wishes that it wasn't there doesn't mean it's not there. And you representing that seller would have to disclose it. I hope you understand that, because that gets a lot of agents in trouble. All right. They said as is, that's not my problem. Well, no, you're licensed in this state. And if you know of defects, you have to disclose those if your client is not. All right. If you're asked, and be careful, some people will call you knowing that they already know the answer. All right, next page. And yes, if a seller gets an inspection report, they have to disclose, okay? And if a listing agent ever tells you, oh, don't send me the inspection report, I always send the inspection report without telling them it's coming, because I want them put on notice. It doesn't matter if they open it or not. State of Georgia says if you receive that on your email, you know, okay? So I want to make sure the listing agent knows, because I don't want them to say, okay, we're not going to do anything, terminate with us, and then go sell to someone else, and they won't do these things hoping that that buyer doesn't have a good inspection. So I always send that inspection report. I'm not going to get questions on that. We're going to answer questions after we get through this form. All right. So brokerage. The listing brokerage agreed to share the commission with selling brokerage. I think you guys know how all that works. Let's slide up a little bit. We are facilitators, not attorneys or inspectors. So this C disclaimer says buyer and seller have not relied upon any advice or representation of brokers other than what is included in this agreement. Brokers shall have no duty to inspect the property or advise buyers or sellers on any matter relating to the property which could have been revealed through a survey, appraisal, title search, termites, utility bill reviews, septic inspection, well water, and so on and so on. What it says is, oh my God, that's mold. I know that's mold. We don't want to buy that house. Do not say that, okay? What you can say is, you may want to have this inspected further by a mold contractor or a general inspector first, and they may make recommendations who needs to inspect it next. Do not put yourself as an expert that you understand if there's termites or not, that you understand if that's mold or not, that you understand, oh, this is being caused by leakage in the roof section. You don't know that. You haven't been up in that attic. So always say, let's get it investigated by, an expert in the industry. And a lot of people, like, you can do roof inspections. There are no charges to that. My HVAC inspector charges like $68, I think, to thoroughly evaluate an HVAC system. So there are a lot of things can be done by experts at very little cost or no cost. Termite people will come out free of charge, in most cases. And then if you want to do the letters, $300 or whatever. So just make sure you're not giving advice. Notice. So verbal is not a notice. Hey, we're going to accept your offer. I've heard that before, and they didn't accept our offer. Or we're under contract. Verbal is not a notice. Okay. A notice is written. In most cases, it used to be fax, email, or in person are the most acceptable forms of notice. Does that make sense? Not verbal. Okay. Let's go to the next page here. Important negotiations need. Okay. I remember one of our wonderful people asked about negotiations. Slide down. Go back to the next page. Chris, just at the bottom. Negotiations need to be in writing. I don't like to say, other than price maybe. If we're at 300 and they say 305, and say, look, Doug, if your client goes to 302, we'll make that work. I'm okay with that. But any other thing other than that last little price, little move or a couple $1,000, put it in writing, always, okay? Earnest money, what happens? Okay, read that clause when you get a chance. You should know your contracts. That whole thing is pretty self-explanatory. Go down a little bit further. Damage or risk to property. This is important. Even after inspection, people go, well, due diligence is over, and my buyers did their walkthrough, and the hot water heater is not working. And the seller goes, well, we should have found that in due diligence. No, a buyer has the right to get the home in the condition that they signed the contract in. So if something happens after due diligence, I'm sorry, but the seller's responsible. You have a right as a buyer, or you don't close, to have the home delivered in the condition they put it under contract. So something happens during the period of when it goes under contract, before they take possession and close on the home, the seller's responsible. Okay? Even in an as-is situation, because that property was in a certain situation when you put it under contract, and if something new happens to it, that seller may be responsible, okay, to make sure they delivered in the condition that you put it under contract. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay. So look at a few of these others. We're getting close on time because I've still got a pretty good bit to go through, so I'm going to speed through a couple of these. Let's go to the next page, and then we'll get a few questions. What does it say at the bottom? Go back. Investors will modify. Okay. All right. Assign. Basically, it says now, if you read that last paragraph, the agreement may not be signed by a buyer except with written approval or seller, which may be withheld for any reason or reasons. Any assignee shall fulfill all the terms and conditions. This happens in the investment world where somebody puts something under contract, they basically flip it to someone else. So investors will usually include a clause in there that assignment is allowed. Okay. All right. GAR forms. You can't make anybody use a GAR form. Another important thing, agents do not bind contracts. You are not binding contracts when you fill in the binding. Okay. You're filling in the information that all parties have agreed, the contract has been acceptable, and the contract is now binding, but you're not binding it. Okay. We accept notice of the contracts, what we're doing. So if you send over, and let's say you're the buyer, you send over an offer at, to the seller signs it, and the listing agent sends it back at 10 p.m. on Saturday. And Sunday morning, you're the buyer's agent, and you open it up at 9 a.m. on Sunday, and that's the second, and Saturday was the first. The binding date is not the second when you open it up. The binding date is the date that it was sent, the email stamp when it was sent out. That's a lot of new agents get themselves in trouble. When the last person who signs, you know, because you can have a counteroffer back and forth. The last person who signs, and they punch the email to say, we've all signed now, we're agreeing, and I'm punching the email to send it to you. That's the stamp and the date goes in the binding, okay? Not when the agent who receives it and slept in late, because they went to Taco Frogs and did margarita pizza night, and they didn't wake up to 10 in the morning the next day, and they opened it up. That is not the binding date. So that's important to understand. It's when it was emailed out. That's for all timestamps. When you're negotiating due diligence, negotiating during due diligence, you're doing repairs, your deadline's at 12 midnight, you send something, you might have something signed at 11:58, and you got it signed, and all of a sudden something's wrong with your computer, and it didn't leave your computer to 12:02, I'm sorry, that's too late. So now you got to figure out if you can correct it, and everybody agreed to extend the date for that, allow that to happen. We can get in that a little bit more. All right, so let's go down a little bit more. I want to kind of get through this by 3:30. When an email is sent from accepting party to receiver, not when receiver opened it. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. All our offices now have a cyber fraud disclosure, right? So they put it in the contract now. We have a disclosure each of us have to get signed by our clients. Next page, next 7. All right, here's a good part, okay. These are exhibits and addendums. All right, here we go. I don't want to confuse anybody because 98% of agents that have been in business 30 years don't know this. I'm putting on my broker hat, okay? If I sent this over and I got all these exhibits in here, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and you see these boxes checked on the left-hand side. Everybody see that? If you do not have those boxes checked and you can still have these exhibits behind it, it is not part of your contract. So if you forget to check that conventional loan contingency exhibit, license law says it's not part of the agreement. So when that happens, the first thing you do is need to put an amendment together, right? Once we have a binding agreement, we put amendments together saying all parties agree that was accidentally left unchecked and now it's part of the agreement. Got it? But if you don't have those boxes checked, they are not part of the agreement. Because I've seen people do it. They have an exhibit at the last minute they put together and they already have those checks and they put one together and they forgot to go back and check the box or do an amendment says we're adding this exhibit and so it's not part of it. And I've seen people doing, I have the financing contingency check and then they go, well, I'm terminating the agreement because of financing contingency. I want my 10,000 earnest money back. The first thing I check is, oops, I am so sorry. You're not getting that money back because it wasn't part of the agreement. You didn't have a financing contingency. So I'm telling you, there's been fights over it, but if you believe in the letter of the license law, it has to because it says all exhibits and addendums attached listed below are referenced or are made part of this agreement. If such exhibit or addendum conflicts with preceding paragraphs, said exhibit shall control. But if you don't have it attached, it doesn't matter if it's an email, it's not part. Now here's the other thing. Sometimes people don't have them signed and people go crazy. I need your initial, I need to sign. And most attorneys will agree. There's a little bit of discrepancy here. You're still part of the agreement because you're acknowledging that they're attached. They're still part of the agreement if they're not signed. The best practice in your compliance broker is going to say, before I give you your mission check, I want all these exhibits initialed and signed. But don't freak out if they're not, or if you forget one, because bottom line is they're checked, they're attached. Okay? So let's go up. That's my broker hat. All right, I did some sample special steps. Seller agrees to order the final water bill on the day of closing, shall not terminate water service for 3 days following closing in order for buyers to have sufficient time to initiate water service. Why is that on there? DeKalb County is notorious about if you don't have their certificate of low flow, DeKalb County will not let your buyer turn on their water. So we actually had a situation, because a lot of this is because it's happened to me. A few years back, when they first started this, the buyer had to wait 7 days before they had water. Okay? If they would have had their certificate, and basically a plumber does it, or a home inspector will do it, signs off that the fixtures are low flow, that certificate goes with them to turn on the water. You need a day or two. So don't let the seller turn off the water in DeKalb County. It's not immediate. All right? Makes sense? Just a little tip. I write that in there for DeKalb County properties that are unincorporated DeKalb. Seller agrees to provide a 1-year home warranty at closing to be selected by buyer not to exceed $600. I think it always needs to be buyer's choice. You should know how much it costs up front. Sometimes I do this now if I'm not in a multiple offer situation. If I'm in a multiple offer situation, I'll do it in the negotiation of repairs. Makes sense? Next, termites. Remember Bob talked about termites? This is special step 328. That's what he was talking about. Okay? I'm going to show you where to find these special steps. Would that be helpful to everybody?
Yes.
Yeah, that'll be helpful for everybody. Okay, so that's a special step. Next page. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one, but COVID. Every office should have a COVID step. This was written by Seth Wiseman. I believe this is his latest version. Kathy Woods, who is our compliance broker, has a broker's corner, and she put this on our broker's corner. You guys should understand this, okay? A lot of people aren't putting this in here, but I've already had it happen on a couple questions that I answered over the weekend. You should fill it out. A lot of people are putting 30 days. It's negotiable. And I'll be honest, a lot of people don't know, like if someone has COVID because of HIPAA laws, in a lot of cases you can't ask people to provide evidence that they have COVID. So I would talk to the closing attorney and saying, if this happens during our process, what do we need to have as verification? Okay, so we could spend a lot of time on this, but I think it should be in your steps because bottom line, we've had a couple instances already where it did affect the closing date, okay, with clients. All right, go through our next page. Let's see. All right, this is the signature page. All right, let's go back. Go, Mr. Buyer, Ms. Seller, supposed to sign a date. Ms. Seller needs to date, okay? But she has not signed this because she hasn't accepted it. The buyer should have signed here. This is an example. I was trying to put this together for you. The buyer should sign. All right, go down here, up. This is important because right here shows where you're giving notice. This licensee email address is what's being listed as notice, okay? So you can mail to the office, but the most quickest is do email. I always check with the seller because this is usually auto-populated, the listing agent for the seller. You want to make sure that superstar@superstar.com is actually the email address to receive notice. Because if it's not, and she sends you something from her, shopping network email, and you think that's the receiving notice, and you send something to that, and that's not on this page because she's been communicating with the other, you may not have given notice. So this is very important to make sure that lines up. That's my broker hat, okay? And I always try to get that filled out. All right, next. Make sure it's filled out properly, I'm saying. Here's an example of an Exhibit A legal description that was provided from our attorney, okay? So you can see that. Yes. Oh, there's a question? Is there a question? Or is that just somebody's background? Okay. All right, seller's property disclosure B. All right, I'm going to try to go this in 5 minutes because we're at 3:25 and we still got stuff to do. All right, seller's property disclosure you should review, and I think you should never submit an offer without it. All right, so we did an example. Yes and no. If it's a yes question, go up a little bit, Ms. Christian, please. If it's a yes question, it needs to be explained. Like, is property vacant? Yes. Why? I relocated because of job transfer. Okay. Next, let's go down, lead-based paint. Yes. All right, this one, this is good. Have any structural reinforcement supports been added? Yes. 12 years ago, Engineering Solutions put in 2 support piers in the crawl space, paperwork related to repair available upon request. That's how a seller should answer a question. Make sense? If it just said, yes, 12 years ago, we put in piers. What are we going to do to represent our buyer? We're going to, at the highest level, we're going to say, we would like documentation. Who did the work? Was it Uncle Bob? Was it an engineering company? Is there any warranty on the work? So that's why if your seller is filling it out, you want to make the buyer feel comfortable and say paperwork related to the repair available upon request. All right, number 5. If I see 28 years on an HVAC, I'm going to tell my buyer, look, HVAC inspection, oh, it's $80. I'm sorry. $80 for an HVAC inspection. If there's 2 HVACs, it's $110. And they'll do a thorough examination. If it's an older system, you need to get it done. Okay? That's just one example. All right, let's go down a little bit further. I think I had some other examples. Nothing on that page. All right, here's a good one. So, and I kind of created this so you can see. The roof's 24 years old. Has any part of the roof been repaired during seller ownership? Yes. In 2016, tree limb damaged a section of the roof repaired. Is that sufficient for your buyer? Say no. No. Who did the repair? Always have licensed contractors double check. And now I know if I don't know who did the repair, they say, well, I don't know. It's done. Blah, blah, blah. You want your roofing contractor. There's a lot of roofing contractors who will come out and do a free estimate and make sure the roof is okay. Or a home inspector at least to do a good inspection. All right. These are warning flags that you can better serve your client at the highest level. So they will refer their friends, family, and coworkers to you because you did such a good job of paying attention to the seller's disclosure. All right, go down. Let's go to the next one, Kristen. Further down, nothing on that page. All right, next one. All right, here's a good one. Are there any underground tanks or toxic hazardous substance in asbestos? All right, there's no answer there. And you will see this, right? Explanation, I don't know. Okay. The way the seller should answer is, do I or do I not have personal knowledge of? So when you ask yourself a question as a seller, you tell your sellers, when you fill this out, ask yourself, do I or do I not have personal knowledge that there are any underground tanks, toxic hazardous substances? No, I don't have any personal knowledge, so that answer should be no. Got it? On any of these questions, the seller should say, do I or do I not have personal knowledge of? Got it? That's how they should answer this. Now look, here's why that question's important. A lot in Atlanta area, a lot of people use kerosene tanks. There was these underground tanks that people would come in and put kerosene in, and they would heat their homes in the 50s and 60s. Now, a lot of people forgot about those. Those tanks are expensive to remove, and you have to do an EPA soil test. So if your client bought a house and one of those were in the ground and somebody found out about it, or they were going to tear down and build something, they are not going to be happy with you if that is a surprise. So you want to make sure that is answered, because if it's answered correctly, guess who Judge Judy is going to go back to? Hey, Mr. Seller, a year later, the buyer's upset and they spent $10,000. Judge Judy is going to say, hey, Mr. Seller, you didn't disclose this. You said there wasn't. and the buyer has $10,000 worth of expenses because of that, I'm going to rule in favor of buyer. Got it? That's what could happen. All right, litigation, we see that. Let's go on down. Kristen. Okay, next page. Any other explanations? All right, let's do fixtures. All right, this is one thing that catches a lot of people. If you go in a home and it has a lot of TVs on the wall, a lot of times people will check television, but they won't check TV mounts and brackets. So what's going to happen is the TVs are going to, and I did that backwards. The TV mount and brackets would stay, but the TVs will be gone. Got it? And those things are ugly because we had one house that had 14 TVs in it and we almost missed it. And all these ugly brackets were all over the walls. I mean, there was 2 of them in bathrooms. And so when you take the brackets down, guess what are in the holes in the walls? The buyer would have had $4,500 of wall repair because of these brackets. So you need to read this really closely. Look at some of this stuff in here. Like, you know, chandeliers. Let's go down a little bit further. I think I put in there chandeliers. The chandelier in the dining room will be removed and replaced with a chandelier of like kind. Okay? You need to put that if you're going to replace things, because does a seller have an obligation to deliver the house in the manner that it was seen and agreed upon when the contract went into effect when it closes? So if you're taking things out of the house, you better describe what you're doing, because they have every right for you to put that back in, because that's what the contract said. They were going to see, they get the house as seen, okay? So that kind of gives you an idea. That's what a seller should say is, I'm going to replace it, and this is how I'm replacing it and what it will look like. All right, next page. You sign it, and here's a big thing, okay? If anything has changed since the signature, it needs to be updated. If it is more than 30 days old, it needs to be re-signed and redated, okay? So we need to make sure that you do that, best practice. All right, I think that's all in the property disclosures. Next, Mitchell Long contingency. This is important. First mortgage, 90%, 30-year term, 3% interest rate, fixed institution. That's how you fill it out. You also have VA, you have FHA, you just fill in the blanks. Go down to the next section, this is important. Approved mortgage lenders. Okay, this is who's listed. ABC mortgage, item money bags, da-da-da-da-da. If you change mortgage, there's language in here. If you change lenders, you have to tell them that you're changing lenders. You change programs. The seller may not allow you to change programs. That has to be mutually agreed upon. That's in that section 3. Financing contingency standard is around 28 days. And then as a listing agent, you want them to provide a loan commitment letter saying they're through with the buyer. Still may be waiting to finish the process with the house and the title, but you're through with the buyer in those 28 days. Next page has the appraisal contingency. It talks about, you should just read these. It's pretty self-explanatory. I'll give you 5 minutes. If you don't understand something, you call Uncle Doug, I don't understand something. And I'll be glad to go over it with you. So that's right there. Here we said 21 days. That's typical. And then if it doesn't appraise, you see right below there, I didn't highlight it. The amendment to sales price is the amendment that you put together trying to negotiate a price. All right, next page. You sign it. So the next one is lead-based paint. Basically, that's pretty standard. You're waiving your right. Most clients waive their right. The opportunity to conduct a risk assessment, that's on 3C. Most of your buyers will waive that right, okay? It's their choice. The cap plumbing and disclosure is what I talked about, low flow. That has to be done. Go up a little bit further, Kristen. Certificate of compliance. When you're in DeKalb County, for example, you get no water, okay? So the home inspector will give you that certificate of compliance. Now, if it's a city municipality like the city of Decatur inside the city limits, you do not have to have it. If it's unincorporated DeKalb, you have to have it, okay? So generally they will inspect and give you, they're just checking to see that you have low flow water fixtures, all right? Next page. GAR forms. All right, so I'm going to take a couple questions on this offer before we go into the GAR forms. And then remember, I'll stay on for a few minutes after Christian takes all the pictures. Make sure you guys were here for 3 hours. So let's do 1 or 2 questions on this because we still have a little bit more to go. I'm going to kind of go through pretty quick. Any questions on what I went over? We'll look at the chat and see, I guess. Power glitches again, logged in from phone. You recommend still showing
I
house.
have a question about the offer. I remember you said it's a good idea to use the listing agent, say for example, their lender or their closing attorney. How do you find out?
Okay, let me make sure because people will misquote me. They'll go in their office and talk to somebody and say, that Doug is crazy. Okay. In some cases, when you have multiple offers and you know that you don't know this agent and you know they might choose someone else from their office or choose someone else they know, then you need to find ways to get your offer in front of them. And one way to do it is use their alliance partners. Okay. Is that clear to everybody? Because sometimes what happens is people take pieces of what I say or don't get the context. In every case, am I using everybody's vendors? No. Offer situation, I want to make sure I compete at the highest level with people. If there's 7 other offers, 2 of those agents may be in their office and I'm at a disadvantage, right? So go ahead. I just want to clear that up. So
I understand the scenario. What I was asking is how do you find out who their alliance partners are?
ask. I know that's, I'm sorry, that sounded rude. I didn't, I'm sorry. But that's what you do, right? It's communication process. Saying, you know, so here's how you do it. I did a real quick script. If it's an inspection, hey, my inspectors are 7 to 8 days out. Who do you use that I can maybe put in the mix? It's my buyer's choice. You're not telling me you're going to do it. You're saying, who do you use and tell me their qualifications. Oh, I use Home Pro. They're ashy, nasty, da-da-da-da. And I'm going in back of my mind, perfect, because they're really good. And I say, well, I'll let my buyer know. You see how I just did that? That's how you do it. You gain leverage. You never give away your leverage. You're not going to use somebody who sucks. Everybody laugh. Ha, ha, ha. You're not going to use anybody that's horrible. But there are plenty of people out there to do this at the highest level. And if that's who they use and you can get in with them, and you might get your offer coming from maybe they'll consider it to now they're really going to consider it, then you might want to consider that. That was my whole point in that. Okay. So let me.
I get it.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Did that answer it?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Dion. Would you recommend still showing houses that are under contract? If my buyer wants to see it, yes. And they're allowed to be showed, yes. There's a whole nother workshop that I do that goes into more detail of how to move. I only show 5 houses before I go under contract. I don't show 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10. It's very rare. It does happen 1 out of 10 times. And there's a workshop I do. Maybe y'all can put that out there once we get back in the live class. I open it to all Rawls offices. It's a 3-day workshop. It's 2 hours, 3 hours each. And we talk about how to show 5 houses, put it under contract, how to write the best contracts. And we put all this in practice. And we have the last day where you guys all have a scenario and you compete among each other to get the seller to accept your contract. It's a pretty cool workshop. So maybe that'll come back up and I'll try to let you guys know. All right, let's go. I think that's all for right now. Let's go to the GARs real quick. You guys realize that you should go through and look at this. This is a GAR index of all the forms. So whether you use FMLS or RDocs, or whatever, these are your GAR forms. And they're separated by consumer brochures, broker engagements. The 200s is purchase and sell. Christian, we're going to go fast. 200s is purchase and sell agreements. Commission shall never be in a contract. So instructions to closing attorneys right there at bottom 200. We don't have time to explain that now, but I'll stay after and answer your questions. The disclosure statements, financing, these are one, I highlighted these, and Christian will send this to you. These are the forms that you're going to use 90% of the time in your business in any given time, right? So you should know these and read these, know these and read these, and I highlight the ones that I see a lot. I probably left a few out. It wasn't done on purpose, but I tried to give you the ones you'll use a lot. Like lead-based paint, you're going to know that one. I didn't highlight it, but you kind of get the picture, right? Community association, you're going to use it if there's community association. But I tried to make sure that you kind of had some of these highlighted that you might not normally know about. So 600 is contingency exhibits. And then 700 is amendments. 800 is clarity, like binding agreement to date. If you don't know, like you're trying to figure out, did she fill in the right date for binding? You can do the notification that all parties agree. Leasing, rental application. Now, these two, leasing and commercial. If you're a new agent, please have help with this. Use a licensed agent who knows leasing, or a licensed agent that knows commercial form and knows commercial to mentor you and assist you throughout that process. I do not think it's a good idea for agents to do something they haven't done before. This business is difficult enough, but the leasing, it's got a lot of nuances if you don't do it, and so does commercial. So make sure you're using help. All right, next. All right, here's the table of contents. So that, I think that's the end. Okay, that just kind of shows you the GAR form table of contents. Okay. Now, special stipulations. A lot of stipulations are already written by Seth Wiseman and his team. Wiseman Novak, who does these contracts and updates these contracts every January and periodically during the year. So this is available in GAR. You should print this out so you can have a quick reference of what special stipulations have already been created for you. So if you look at the top, contingencies, agency, agricultural, due diligence, earnest money, finance, these are all the different categories of special stips. So if we go through the index, you can see them all listed, and then it has a number. What I then do is I look up the actual special stip, and I cut and paste it and put it in my contract, like I showed you that example with the termite letter that Bob talked about, okay? You can go through this pretty quick, okay? And you just see them. There's a group of them. And then the special stipulations, here is all the special stipulations in their group. See, agency, and all the special stipulations already been written. I just did the first 3 pages of this. Agricultural ones. I think the next one is due diligence ones. Is everybody kind of getting how it works? And stop right there. So there's a whole bunch of those. I have saved those as a PDF, and whenever I need something that's already pre-rented, I am not an attorney. I will copy and paste those and put those in my offers, okay? So a lot of that work's been done for you. So again, I take an hour a week. I'll try to memorize. I'll go through and read. Like maybe I just want to read special stips for an hour. And then next week I might read the purchase and seller agreement for an hour. Next week I might do the brokerage buyer's agreement for an hour. I want to keep looking at things because things change, and I want to keep making myself an expert in my business and understand these tools that I use, okay? So
where do you get those again?
that's all, those are all GAR forms. So I R docs in FMLS.
Okay.
R docs, and you can search by those forms, like just GAR or special stips, and they will come up, and you can click on them, and that's a whole document. Does that make sense?
Yep.
I actually have in my tile, like in R docs, you have a client tile. I have a master tile that just has those forms on, so I can reference that at any time. I download the purchase and sale, a blank one I download. If I want to send anybody anything, hey, look, why don't you take a look at the example of the purchase and sell? So when we put an offer in, you kind of know what an offer looks like, right? So I do that. I keep kind of a lot of these on a big, long PDF. It's separated, but in a PDF folder, you can do it any way you want. So you can access them really quickly. And if you got 10 minutes, read these forms. Because I will tell you, I love working with agents who understand how to write a contract, understand the language of the contract, and basically, you know, that's somebody you want to work with again, okay? And it's usually a win-win for all parties. All right, representing the seller. It says here, receive the offer, gather the information about the buyer, present the offer to your client, respond to the offer. I receive the offer, I immediately send it to my client, and then I gather information about the buyer, and then we talk about it, okay? And so I think that's important. When you gather information about the buyer or the agent, I also want to know, you can't be derogatory about an agent. I want to know how the agent works. Do they like to negotiate? Do they get straight to the point? Are they have certain, you know, certain things they like certain attorneys. I just want to understand all of that. And then when you receive the offer, I don't think this, you go up a little bit, Kristen, when it says receive the offer, and I highlighted this. First, thank the buyer for agent for the offer. If you know or even think there may be another offer coming, tell the buyer agent at that time. This will create urgency. I don't like to do that because it can turn people off. Some buyers withdraw their offers because they don't want to compete. I don't want to be in a competing situation. So you got to know your situation. I don't think this is something that you should always just carte blanche do. Now, as a new agent, you got to have a foundation, but as an experienced agent, I'm not always going to do that. I'm going to consult with the seller and kind of say, what do we want to tell buyers? Do we want to let them know we have other offers, or do we don't? Do we want to, you know, do we want to say we have a period of time where we're taking other offers, or how do we want to do it? We let our clients make the decision, but we do guide them. And then gather information about the buyer. I put some notes here, okay? The one thing I want you to see, because we're getting short on time, I want to kind of go through this. Be careful of questions that may violate license law. For example, you can't ask buyers how many, you know, it says like kind of find out more about the buyer. You're asking if you're the listing agent, you're asking the buyer's agent questions. You can't ask familiar questions. You can't ask somebody how many kids they have. You can't ask how old someone is. You can't ask, I mean, I've had, and we represent clients from all over. I've had people of dark skin, black skin say, and because we work with everybody, and I have great friends, and say, we don't want to live in a black neighborhood. I can't steer, and they're black. And I say, I can't do that. I can't answer that question. That's against fair housing. You're going to have to explore neighborhoods and tell me what neighborhoods you want to be in. I had Muslim people come over and say, we want to be next to a temple. Because we represent people, we're very international in our representation and in our friendships with people in the city, with our clients. So you got to be careful when you ask other agencies questions that are familiar status, okay, are protected fair housing law violations. And that's my broker hat, because you don't know who could be shopping you, or maybe some agent turned you in because they don't like you, and somebody is shopping you or trying to create a situation to find out and trip you up. It does happen. So let's go to the next page. I just want to mention that. Just be careful. Let's do the right thing. Checklist for reviewing an offer. Okay. I don't have a lot of time, but here's a couple things I want to tell you. You present all offers. And my recommendation is you respond to all offers. You never know. People are told, hey, just lowball them. They know you're not going to accept it, but they are told to start that way. So I tell my seller, let's respond respectfully, and let's see what happens next. Always suggest that. It's not offensive. People are sometimes, especially new home buyers, mom and dad told them, on my day when I bought the house 30 years ago, we negotiated it. We never offered list price. And that's what they're going to do because mom and dad told them to do that. So you got to tell your seller, like, chill out. We'll entertain it, and we will always counter. If you go over time limit, you got it. It says you are accepting all parties need to initial, take care of the counter. What I will tell you is you can in the counter say time limit was extended. So don't worry about going over time limit. Sometimes you can, if you're working together and all parties working together, you can extend the time limit in the counter. Lender phone conversation is how, like pre-approval. I'm always going to talk to the lender about that. There's some other notes on that. Just know financing, 100% loans and 96.5% loans, FHA loans, and you got a 20% down. I know this sounds horrible. I'm fourth generation Marine, but I'm going to look as a seller and recommend my seller that you might have appraisal problems with those loans. Okay? You need to take a look at how much is being put down. All right. All right, let's go through. I think we've kind of talked a lot of this other stuff you'll find. Possession date, negotiate date, the buyer will take possession after closing to allow your seller sufficient time. A lot of times that won't happen. In Georgia, that's not always done. In other states, it is. And then remember, in our contract, seller has to clean the house. It's already in there. They have to present a house that's clean and broom swept. It's already in your contract, so don't worry about that. Next, an email, review, present your offer. I like to basically send the offer, then I go over it with my client. I don't do a summary chart. I go through it and I talk about it. It says in person, but with COVID, you got to do a lot of things on telephone. Also, explain all right, this question mark kind of 3 right before reach a decision in the middle of the page. Explain the offer, discuss the days on the market, number of showings, review and updated CMA. I do that once a week on listings. And then, so I already have done that. I make sure my client each week knows what's going on in the market. To accept the offer, counter the offer. Remember, If somebody accepts it, it's not accepted till it's recognizable form of notice. Telephone call is not saying we accepted. They better get that notice over there in writing or in a form that's accepted, such as email, writing, or in person. Do not recommend not responding, always counter. All right, next page. We got 2 minutes. Can you bear with me 2 more minutes? Your turn presenting offers. Remember, majority of the time, it's a starting point. I think you guys can read this. Be careful. On the bottom, recommend your client accept the offer. Be careful. It really needs to be there. Go up a little bit, Kristen. Be careful. It really needs to be your client's decision. All right. You don't make decisions. Remember, a lot of people, if they start at 280, sellers at 300, if the seller responds, they're thinking it should end at 290. Doesn't mean it has to. All right. Some people have to go to a closing. Will you go ahead and take a picture of time? I think there's just a couple other things I'm going to show, and I think we're done. I think I'm going to show a counter offer. Kristen, are you there? Kristen.
Yes, I was muted, but I just took a screenshot, so you guys are good. Those who need to leave.
All right. I apologize. I hope this has been informative. Give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. Be kind in reviews because it's a good heart. I'm just trying to teach you what I know. And a lot of people are just fluffing you, okay? And just, I think this is all important. You basically decide what you want to use. So let's go through this real quick if you got a couple more minutes. And I'll stay on to answer some questions. These are more scripts. I like this script a lot. I think it's a better script. It really gets to the details. So I would look at that and practice that. All right, our next page. Respond to the offer. Important. A contract is binding when the accepting party is giving notice. Okay, we got that. I think some of this is regurgitation. Kristen, next page. Agents not buying contract. Talking about, okay, counteroffer. Okay, this is very important. I'm going to take a minute on this. Counteroffer. If they don't accept it, you counter. And remember, in this example, if this is more than one counter, only the last counter, if it's signed, only the information on that last counter counts. Counter offer number 1, 2, 3, 4, if this is number 5, none of those matter anymore. Only the last counter signed, and it overrides anything on the purchase and sale agreement, okay? Just make sure also you do not go back and sign the purchase and sale agreement as a seller because that creates a conflict. You only sign the counter. All right, go up a little bit. Only the spaces that are filled out. When it's left blank, you refer to the purchase and sale agreement. So they didn't change the holder of the earnest money. They didn't change the closing attorney. They didn't change earnest money. They didn't change due diligence. What they did counter with, go back up, I'm sorry. They did counter price, closing cost, and closing date. All right, does that make sense? Next page. It's just counter, it should be signed, of course, whoever sends it. Next page, is that it?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so in conclusion, I think the last conclusion, we don't really need the slides, just our customer experience. We just want to talk about the way I do business. I follow the Y4C2Ts to the T. And if you follow it and putting in offers in, where you understand that the buyers and sellers are win-win, no deal, integrity, do the right thing. I'm just reading that, if you can pull that up, Kristen. I don't know if this is the final, yeah. The win-win or no deal, you need to tell your buyers, are your sellers who you're representing? That's important. Integrity, do the right thing. Customers always come first. In this case, our clients. Commitment in all things. Communication. Communication is the key. Creativity. We came up with a lot of great ideas, right? So we got to be creative sometimes. Teamwork, we work together. If they don't work with us, they're not going to buy it. Or if they don't work with us, they're not going to sell it, depending on which side you're on. Trust starts with honesty. Always answer questions honestly, and success results through people. We all have to work together. So with that said, I hope this has been enjoyable. Is there any questions? I will stay around for a little while if anybody wants to hang around and ask questions. And I hope you have a great rest of Ignite. So thumbs up, I'm going to put it on the thing. Anybody got a thumbs down? Everybody thumbs up? Okay, good. All right, any questions?
Can you go over the loan commitment and requesting a loan commitment from the lender again?
Yes, yes. All right, hold on one thing, Ms. Thurman. Kristen, do you need to stay here with this? If you go off, will this shut down?
I think so.
All right. Can you give me 15 minutes to answer some questions?
Yeah.
I'll just answer. You can do what you need to do. I'll just stay on for 15 minutes, okay?
Okay.
Is that all right? I owe you one. Lunch on me. Okay. All right, Ms. Thurman, you had a question.
Yes, I was just saying, can you explain the loan commitment and requesting a loan commitment from the lender again?
Yes. So basically, have you ever seen one? It's, believe it or not, you've probably seen it. When an underwriter's through their process, they have a form that says that the buyer has been approved for this loan, the conditions have been cleared, and usually it goes through and it says quite a few things, and it says the only thing left is usually transfer of title, and in some cases, what is the last thing? Sometimes it will have appraisal.
Okay.
Outstanding. So because what they're doing is you're calling, how you do this is you call the lender, your lender, and say, I'm going to offer a situation, or my client is going to have a hard time competing. And the way that I'm going to be able to break through and make sure we get the home they want is we got to be able to show a seller that we're ready to go. And I understand that your bank offers a process that where my buyer can turn in their information and go ahead and have that looked at, all their bank statements, work history, things like that, everything they may need to qualify for this particular loan. And you can allow an underwriter to see it, and that underwriter will write us a commitment letter. And then you'll send that letter to me, and then I can include that with my offers. Is that correct? Supreme does that. I think other companies probably do it too. We just use Supreme because they're our alliance partner. That, if you think about it, makes the seller go, wow, they're a lot more ahead of the game than these other offers. Make sense? So that's how you do it, Ms. Thurman. So.
All right, thank you.
Question. No, good. Thank you. That's a great question.
Mr. Graves, I just got a quick comment. I want to say thank you. This is Ebony Patino, by the way.
Hey, Ebony, please call me Uncle Doug, or Doug's fine.
Okay. I just want to thank you for your time. You really dropped some jewels on us. I can't believe you fit all that valuable information into 3.
I have teenage. Were you vibing?
Yeah, it felt like 5 minutes. So.
Okay. Well, were you vibing though? I think that's a real cool teenage word now. You got to be vibing with it.
Yeah, you see the vibe, right? You know.
Okay, that's vibe. Okay.
Yeah.
So, thank you for the compliment. How can do you have a question?
Yes, I just wanted to get your phone number very quickly.
Okay, I'll give it. I think she's going to send it, but it's 404.
Okay.
441.
441.
3024.
3024. Thank you.
I am a 7 a.m. to about a 8 p.m. I have family. I had kids late. I have 2 teenage daughters and a lovely wife that one day she's going to wake up and say, I married you. I hope she doesn't, but I do spend time with them. So if you text me, I will say, hey, can I, if you say urgent, I'll try to get to you real quick. If not, I'll get back to you. And if I have it, text me again. It might, because I have a very busy life. I'm not ignoring you.
Understand.
I prefer text. And usually I'll say you got 5 minutes for a conversation, because to me, if you text and I'm in a car, I might not get the gist of your question. I think conversations are always good, and I think we should do more of them, even in the 21st century. Okay?
Okay, thank you. You take care.
Yes, ma'am.
Dougie.
Yes, sir.
Got a quick question, man.
Dougie Fresh.
You pretty much mentioned earlier, I kind of came in on the tail end of it, and I was trying to put it all together. When you're putting in an offer and you have like the part where the closing cost is.
Yes, sir.
I know you said on the notes, I think I seen it said either leave it blank or I guess 0 or something like that.
Well, you never leave anything blank.
Okay, I thought one of your
yeah, 0
said that. So say for instance, if you go in with like 0, like you go and put in an offer and you have that the seller should pay like 0 or any closing costs. Is there any other time during the contract that you can, or during, I guess, like the under contract period that you can kind of negotiate that, or is pretty much basing it off of like maybe an appraisal coming back under?
Well, we talked about that. The reason you would go 0 is if you've got multiple offers.
Right.
Because in a multiple offer situation, there are going to be agents who are going to go 0.
Right.
Some sellers are going to look at that first, that top line, and go, oh, they asked for closing costs and they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
You pay attention what the final price is, because he knows you're going to negotiate price, right? Mm-hmm. So he's going to counter all these or ask for highest and best. And people will ask for closing costs with some sellers are going to get booted in multiple offer situations. you're the only game in town and the property's been on the market for a while, I always ask for closing costs. I'm talking about in situations, and this is why it makes sense that we understand what the context of the situation is. Multiple offer situations, I like to negotiate with net in case the seller in his mind's going, well, this offer doesn't have closing costs. And maybe mine's 300 with 5 in closing costs, and that one's 290 with none, and mine is actually better. He gets called up on, I'm asking for closing costs, and throws mine out. So when you have a multiple offer situation, I say net 0. Then I go back after we get under contract and I go to the listing agent and say, look, I just found out, my young buyers are going to try to put as much money down as possible. They really like to have their closing costs paid by the seller. We understand we agreed to that 300 with no closing costs. Would you please ask if he wouldn't mind going up to 305 and contributing that closing cost? 99% of the time, the seller will go, all right, that's fine. Because he still gets his 300.
Right.
So that's the way to do it. Doesn't always work that way. A lot of times it does. But
Do you have any scripts for buyers with no money?
yeah, there's plenty of them. God bless your, as grandma would say, bless your heart. I'm sorry, they don't have no money. But I'm I came from very humble beginnings. And my first house, I had to work hard. And when we had to put 20% down. So I get it, it's hard. I think as far as when you say scripts, as
far as like being prepared around what they should expect, like a lot of the examples we use today with like, not earnest money, but what was the other one?
Option money. What
do you do when you're dealing with a seller who is robbing Peter to pay Paul to get to the closing table as is? Is it a conversation around maybe we wait until you save more money? Or, we negotiate as hard as we can, recognizing that we need a seller to pay the closing costs. We need,
I think what helps in those cases to help improve the situation, because you're still going to have the situation, is look at getting your buyer underwritten with a commitment letter. The seller sometimes loves that. There are also quite a few people that are very sympathetic for people who've served in their country. So if they're doing a VA loan, that sometimes can be a very positive thing too. There's a lot of lovely men and women who have served their country that if you have a sympathetic seller, that makes a difference. Okay. So having a commitment letter showing the seller that, hey, everything's done, having that, and then writing the letter, if you remember, from you saying how you're going to move in the process, communicating and making sure they can check on the process, how you're going to order an inspection. You can do all these things and you're stacking up, giving yourself a better chance. Nothing's going to be somebody who has cash willing to pay $20,000 over just because they can. You're never going to beat that.
Right.
That's why you have a second choice and a third choice and a fourth choice and fifth choice. And you keep looking and you keep fighting for your client. And I've been in those shoes. So those are a couple examples of how to get it closer to acceptability. And remember, there's no guarantees. I've had people with all cash not get chosen because an agent chose somebody else in the office that wasn't represented so they can get paid 6%. You never know.
Okay. And then last question had to do with all of the kind of what we'll do up front promises when we put our offer in. Is that a part of your presentation, or where can we find that information?
And again, that's a good question. It's different, right? Sometimes I do it because you can tell I'm a strategist. It's about the situation. So if I feel I'm competing with agents that I don't know, or somebody doesn't know me, and there may be a bias toward another agent, then I'm going to write something like that out, and you better make sure you do it. Okay. And so there's no stock answer. Now there's probably examples in our workshop. I'll put some examples and do scripts where I write it on the board so you can see it, but you kind of get the concept. What are you willing to do to make the seller feel more comfortable choosing you, and put that exhibit on top so they can read it. And I think I don't have to do it as much because I've been doing this for long enough. A lot of people know me and they can tell that I know what I'm doing. But newer agents, their agent biases. So a lot of listing agents say, You know, am I going to choose to work with Doug, or am I going to choose to work with, you know, Dwayne? And it might not be, it might just be because Doug is an old trusty guy, he's been doing it a long time, and Dwayne is new. But I was in Dwayne's shoes many years ago, and then somebody else was in my shoes. So I think that just helps new agents more than anything. When you don't have a team or you don't have a big system, they don't know who you are, you can kind of get their attention by saying, here's how hard I'm going to work and here's what we're going to do for you. So, but you make that your own, right? Christina, make that your own, because everything that I do might not work for you. You go talk to an agent down your hall right now and they go, that Doug is crazy. I would never do that, or never do this, and never do that. We're all unique individuals. And I do what is best for the situation, and I make mistakes, and then I try to do something different. So figure out what works, what you can put in your letter that you feel comfortable. Okay, next question. We still got a little time.
I noticed in the listing, I didn't see any escalation clauses. Are those used in this area?
In the, you mean in the offer?
I mean, the offers. Yeah, I didn't see any.
They are. I've used them. It just depends on this, again, the situation.
Okay.
I would make sure in your young real estate career, in your office, that you probably have a productivity coach, probably have an assistant team leader who's coaching you, or you might have a mentor in the office, or you might be on a team. But everybody has different styles. I think they're effective, but I don't think there's a one fix all. I think some listing agents don't like them because it kind of, you know, they might not have multiple offers. So they don't have it, you know, so they want you to pay higher. So then they kind of like, how do they counter that? So it's best to work some multiple offers if you actually have one. But, you know, just ask your coach in that situation, does this make sense to do? Sometimes it's better to do option. And sometimes if you don't have any competition, I wouldn't do either one, right? So it's just the situation. Okay, next. We'll do a couple more. I think we're getting close.
Did you tell us where to find the special stipulations?
It's under, do you use RDocs?
RDocs?
Do you use RDocs? Do you use FMLS?
Yes.
Okay, so in FMLS, you go, there's RDocs.
Okay.
RDocs is all the forms.
Gotcha.
And then you can do a little tutorial, and then it pops up and you can search by partial, the numbers. Those indexes will show you all the numbers. You can start typing in, like if you're looking for something with earnest money, you just type in earnest. All
Okay.
earnest money come up and you can select which one you want, whatever.
Got
Okay, any more?
Thank you.
Has it been good? Everybody good? All right, show me some love when you put the forms in, okay? All right, I'm gonna wave bye-bye now.
Thank you, Uncle Doug.
Hey, I got 5 minutes for everybody, okay? If you need anything.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
see you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.